and I even make mention of the Matrix books and having read them in the sessions because it was at that point in time. We had a lot of really unusual experiences, but then we got to the topic of pathology because the C's kept trying to say, there's more to this phenomenon than you're asking about. There's more to there's more going on than your simplistic questions are allowing us to give to you. Mm-hmm. And we had to really start expanding our thinking and expanding our, the possibilities. And we had experiences that led to the topics of pathology in human beings and how pathological human beings, and maybe pathology is even kind of a wrong word to use, because if something is genetically born that way and it's born that way for a purpose, how can we say that it's pathological? It is what it is. Mm-hmm. Pathology implies that there's a sickness. Well, it's a sickness from the point of view of normal human beings, human beings who care about one another, that constitute the majority of humanity. Or did. That's rapidly changing because apparently, according to the C's, and it seems to be happening before our eyes, that they have been creating a ruthless race in which to incarnate themselves at the time of this upcoming macrocosmic quantum event so that they can rule over the rest of humanity, whatever remains, in the higher density state. In other words, they want to lock this planet into their evil garden spot for them to have control and domination. They think, of course, for all of eternity. That's their plan. That's their intention. And, we would like to see that doesn't happen. We'd like to see a future freedom for people. And the C's have said that also is possible. But the people can't do it until they can connect together in a certain way. And they cannot connect together in a way that can block that hyperdimensional. In other words, what we want to do is we want to cut off their power supply. There are all of these pathological people on our planet, and they're getting fueled by these hyperdimensional negative beings that are negative. You can't even plumb the depths of their negativity. You read about the most horrible crimes that have ever occurred committed by so-called humans on this planet, and you're getting a little bit of the picture of what their internal landscape is like. Okay? So, pedophilia, snuff films using children, cannibalism.
I totally, exactly, and we can allow people's imaginations to
okay,
go
so
wild with that.
So that's the kind of beings that they are trying to engineer. I want you to really understand how horrible a world it would be if they succeeded, because they would have, the total freedom to do whatever they wanted with any normal human being who has a soul and who has a conscience, and to make them suffer as much as they possibly can in order to feed off that energy of suffering, because that's what they do. They feed off of that energy of suffering. They're not psychopaths, and they're psychophages. They are soul eaters. They eat souls. They are light eaters. They eat it. So the Caesar said that there is a way that we can cut off the power supply of these pathologicals that are taking over our planet. But it involves connecting ourselves together in a very specific way. And, I can't give you all the exact details right now because I don't have the text in front of me. But it involves clearing out your emotional garbage, getting free of your programs, the manipulated programs that have been put into you since you were born, cultural programs, religious programs, political programs, so on. But that if humanity, because what they've done is they have divided us and conquered us this way. It's like men against women, straights against gays, blacks against whites, Hispanics against whites. All of these superficial differences that mean nothing, have nothing to do with the real essential core difference, which is the difference between an individual who has a soul and has compassion and empathy for other human beings and those that do not, we're calling them pathological. I explained that, but we'll use that for the sake of convenience.
Okay.
So, the real difference is whether there is a soul or there isn't a soul. And the story of how the blood got mixed is in our most ancient legends, that somewhere along the way, there was a mutation. Maybe it was a deliberate engineered being or a group of them that were put on this planet, to spread these psychopathic genes throughout the population. These individuals, any family can produce a psychopath. Some more than others because, multiple strains come together. So it's not a question of black or white or, any of those things. The question is, soul or not soul. And even people, even the so-called organic portals, people who don't have souls, just because they aren't individual souls doesn't mean that they're bad either. It's just that they are more susceptible to being used by the negative forces because they follow the leader. And who is the leader on our world? Psychopathic individuals in positions of power. So we have a chance, we can, and the Seas have given us techniques, specific instructions. We have been putting them into practice. We have a breathing and meditation program that is specifically designed. The Seas have said that this program is even more ancient than anything you could ever learn, from yoga, that it is the same techniques that were used by the Paleolithic peoples who built the megaliths, who put the megaliths together, the ones who did the cave paintings. These people had stable societies. There was no warfare on the planet. The archaeology does not show violence and warfare for 25,000 years. 25,000 years. These people lived in basically what was an Edenic state. And then there was a cataclysm, a catastrophe about 13,000 years ago. The megafauna all over North America and Europe was destroyed in a single instant, and another ice age was initiated, a temporary one. It was a shorter one than the long one we had just come out of. But this was the time, I believe, that the mutations that we now deal with, the psychopathy mutations, originated, and they began at that point.
Okay, are you talking about before Atlantis or after?
Well, I would say that probably that is what is remembered as the Atlantean deluge. And I just finished reading a really marvelous book that collects the legends and myths from Eastern Europe and from Central Asia and from even Northern Europe and compares them one to another, because most of us, all we know about is the Oriental or the Middle Eastern thing, the Bible, the Bible story of the Bible story of the flood is a rather late comer, and it's been, highly edited and modified. There are some really ancient stories of this event, and they come from from Native American, from Australian, the Aborigines. You have stories from Pacific Islanders. You have South American stories. There are a lot of stories that are much older and more authentic than what, this highly edited, sanitized version that we get from the Bible, which has permeated our culture. We need to learn about this because this happened, and there's a lot of scientific work on this, like Victor Klube and Bill Napier, and right now there's Richard Firestone, Alan West, and Simon Warwick Smith, who wrote the book The Cycle of Cosmic Catastrophes about this event. There's a lot of science being done that validates everything the Seas have said about these events. And of course these guys, they don't want to know that some so-called channel source, me in the future called the Cassiopeians, talked about what they are proving scientifically.
Right.
But, there it is.
Well, actually, that's an interesting question, to think about, which is whether or not your husband, and how do you say Arcady? Is that how you say his name?
Just call him Ark.
Ark, okay. So
I found the Ark.
I hear you. How Ark, he would deal with the science end of things.
He's working on this. He's working on a lot of the things, a lot of clues that the Seas have given, mathematical clues about modeling dimensions and densities and gravity and those sorts of things. And he's making excellent progress. I don't want to talk about that too much, but he's making some really good progress with that. We do have, and I'll say, science has been taken over by pathology too. There are many good scientists who are interested in these topics, who are interested in the paranormal, who are interested in what we're doing. And believe it or not, we get together with them and talk about the seas. I get emails from people across the world who are doing, real scientific research, and they ask me, well, what do the seas think about this? And I give them, of course, I would never bring their names out in public. I would not embarrass, I would not cause them problems with their institution. Come on, when Brian Josephson started, a Nobel Prize winner, started talking about the paranormal in some of his life, the rumors started immediately, propagated like wildfire in the scientific community that he was having a nervous breakdown and he needed, a long rest. This is what happens because in science, they do not and cannot allow consciousness that exists outside the body to be demonstrated as a demonstrable fact. I don't say that we're ever going to prove it in any satisfactory material way, a non-material phenomenon, but we can demonstrate that that's the way it is. I mean, if you're sitting there on the side of the road and people keep walking by you on the road and they say around the bend there, they just crossed a bridge over a river and for some reason you can't get up and walk and go around the bend, but 500 people have passed by and some of them even said, I stopped and got my feet wet, and you see them with wet feet, or I fell off the bridge into the river and they're soaking wet, and all of these people are walking by you telling you about this river and this bridge. That's pretty, convincing that bridge actually exists and that river actually is there. And maybe you can even hear the rushing water. And maybe you can hear steamboats or, people splashing in the water. Absolutely. You can't see it with your eyes. You haven't put your foot in it yourself. But it's convincing. That's how the paranormal is. That's how paranormal events are.
Absolutely. And that's actually what we're doing here today. We are talking to a witness of these events, okay, of this information. And actually, that's our portal into the unknown, are the people. We're actually portals in essence, bringing back information about what cannot be seen in this reality, this 3D materialistic reality. And so we've got to move beyond it, and we've got to use the eyes that we have, and the senses that we have, and we certainly have more than the traditional number of, what is it they say you have, 5 senses? I don't even know. I'm so
5.
used to so many more being part of my understanding.
Part of the problem there is that paranormal phenomena are like macrocosmic quantum phenomena. In the quantum world, you can observe momentum or position, never both at once. I mean, once you've observed momentum, you've changed position and vice versa. So, the materialists, and I think that there should be some kind of testing process to determine if an individual has a soul or not before they're allowed to become a scientist. I'm sorry, but, okay. I think that people without a soul who also don't have a conscience, should not be in positions of authority in any sphere of activity. But they say, oh, you've got to prove, you've got to be repeatable. Well, how repeatable is it observing the same atom in the same momentum or position over and over again in a laboratory? It's absolutely, utterly, even theoretically impossible. Yet they want to impose that demand on paranormal phenomena that are non-physical, that are basically macrocosmically quantum. Mm-hmm. So, and they say, and Carl Sagan, well, extraordinary claims demand extraordinary proof. Well, come on, if this were a murder trial in a court of law, there would already been a hanging. Mm-hmm. I mean, hundreds of years ago. How did we go so wrong? Because pathologicals took over our government, took over our religion, took over our society, took over our education. They completely removed spirit, consciousness, soul from the entire equation. We live in a postmodernist, rational world where being human means to be a machine.
Exactly. Absolutely.